More than 170 feet long. That's the size of a single figure carved into the California desert, so massive that for centuries, no human on the ground even knew it was there. It was only spotted by accident, from an airplane. But that's just the beginning. Hidden across California, in its deserts, its foggy hills, and its freezing mountain peaks, are structures so old that no written record explains them. Miles of stone walls no one remembers building. Cliffs, covered in 5,000 carvings nobody can read. Rocks that slide across the ground by themselves. Who made them? How? And why would anyone haul boulders weighing a ton into the middle of nowhere? Some of these were built thousands of years ago, and the scariest part? Even the experts admit they still don't have the answers. Stick with me, because number 1 will leave you speechless. Let's begin. So tell me in the comments, if you could stand in front of just one of these for 10 minutes, which would you pick? And what would you ask the people who built it? We pour our hearts into every single video, so if this amazed you, subscribe. It's just one click, and it means the world to us. Hit that bell, and I'll see you at the next mystery. Number 10. Racetrack Playa's Sailing Stones. Let's start with one that bends the very definition of structure. But stick with me, because it's one of the most beautiful mysteries on the entire planet, and for decades, it made brilliant scientists look absolutely foolish. Picture the most remote corner of Death Valley National Park. There, hidden behind miles of brutal dirt road, lies Racetrack Playa, a dead flat, cracked, dry lakebed stretching out like the surface of another world. And scattered across it are rocks. Some are pebbles, some weigh hundreds of pounds. But behind every single one trails a long, carved track etched into the mud, as if the stone had gotten up and gone for a walk. Some trails run over 300 feet, some curve, some even make sharp turns in reverse direction. For years, people lost their minds over this. Hurricane winds? Magnetic fields? Aliens? Nobody could catch the rocks moving. They only ever found the aftermath. It felt genuinely impossible. Then, in 2014, researchers finally caught it on camera, and the answer was almost stranger than the legends. On rare freezing nights, a thin sheet of ice forms on the flooded Playa. As the sun rises, that ice shatters into huge floating panes, and a gentle breeze, sometimes barely enough to feel, slowly shoves those ice sheets across the slick mud, pushing the rocks along inch by inch. So slow you'd never notice. So powerful, it moves stones the size of microwaves. So yes, this one is technically solved. But here's why it earns its place on this list. It's a perfect lesson in humility. The unexplainable turned out to be real, quiet physics we simply hadn't been patient enough to witness. How to experience it? Reaching the racetrack demands a high-clearance vehicle, spare tires, and serious preparation. This is unforgiving country. And listen carefully, never ever move or take a stone. Removing even one destroys the phenomenon forever. Just go, stand in that endless silence, and let one solved mystery remind you how many others out there still aren't. Number 9. Wenduma, the standing stone high on the crest of the Inyo Mountains, looming above the Owens Valley, stands something that shouldn't be possible. A lone rock pillar roughly 80 feet tall, thin, upright, and pointing at the sky like a giant stone finger. Its name is Wenduma, and it has watched over this valley for longer than anyone can measure. Now, I have to be honest with you, because honesty is what separates a real story from a tall tale. Geologically, Wenduma is a natural formation. So why on earth is it on a list of structures? Because to the people who've lived beneath it for thousands of years, it was never just a rock, and that changes everything. To the Owens Valley Paiute, Wenduma is deeply sacred. The legend runs like this. Long ago, during a desperate war with an invading tribe, a great medicine man named Wenduma climbed to the crest of the Inyos. And there, at the height of the battle, he was turned to stone, frozen forever as an eternal sentinel, standing guard over his people. Look up, and he's still there. Here's the mystery layer that fascinates me. Sites like this blur the line between natural and built. For countless generations, people oriented their entire world around this landmark. They told stories about it, made journeys toward it, and wove it into their ceremonies and their sense of home. In every way that matters, It became a monument, just one shaped by meaning instead of by hands. And so much of the specific knowledge tied to it was disrupted forever, leaving us with the outline of its importance, but not the full picture. Practical takeaway. Next time you're driving through Owens Valley, look east toward the Inyo Crest and scan the skyline. You just might catch that improbable spike against the blue. And when you do, remember this: to ancient Californians, the landscape itself was architecture. Every peak, every pillar, every strange stone was a character in a living, breathing story, one we're only beginning to appreciate. Number 8. Chumash Painted Cave. Tucked into the rugged folds of the Santa Ynez Mountains above Santa Barbara, there's a small sandstone opening you could easily walk right past. But step up to it, peer inside, and the darkness suddenly explodes with color, swirling reds, deep blacks, and ghostly whites twisting into circles, wheels, sunbursts, and figures that almost seem to move on the rock. This is Chumash Painted Cave, known to the Chumash themselves as Alaxuluxan. These paintings weren't decoration. They were created over centuries by Chumash shamans, spiritual specialists, who, often in deep altered states, painted to reach and influence the supernatural forces they believed controlled: weather, sickness, luck, and fate. This wasn't art for an audience. It was a doorway to the spirit world, opened again and again across generations. And some of the imagery is startlingly, chillingly specific. Anthropologists studying the cave have suggested that one dark disk on the wall may actually record a total solar eclipse, one that crossed this exact region back in 1677. Imagine that. A moment of terrifying midday darkness, witnessed centuries ago, painted onto stone so it would never be forgotten. But here's the honest, humbling truth. We cannot fully read these paintings. The precise meaning of each symbol was held only by initiated specialists, a sacred knowledge passed carefully from person to person. And much of that understanding was shattered during colonization, lost before it could ever be written down. So today, we stand at the gateway, grasping the purpose of the cave, yet unable to translate its actual language. We're looking at a message we know is profound, and we can't quite hear what it's saying. How to experience it. The cave is protected behind a metal grate at a small state historic park, and you view it from just outside. Visit around midday, when sunlight reaches deepest into the chamber, and give it time, because the longer you stand there and stare, the more hidden figures slowly emerge from the shadows and reveal themselves. Number 7. The White Mountains Alpine Cairns. Now we go extreme, to one of the most punishing and mind-bending sights in the entire state. Near the summit ridges of the White Mountains, at a lung-crushing elevation of nearly 12,000 feet, sits a single location that holds over 200 separate rock features: cairns, rings, low stone walls, all carefully assembled by human hands, in a place with thin air, savage cold, howling wind, and absolutely no obvious reason to build anything at all. Think about that for a second. This isn't a valley with water and shelter. This is the roof of the world, where every step steals your breath, and the weather can turn deadly in minutes. And yet someone climbed all the way up here, not once, but many times, to stack hundreds of stones with purpose. Researchers who documented this remarkable site interpret it as a center of alpine ceremonialism. In other words, a sacred high place used by indigenous people for vision quests and deep spiritual work. And here's the twist that makes it click. The extreme difficulty wasn't a problem to overcome, it was the entire point. The exhaustion, the cold, the isolation, the dizzying altitude, all of it helped strip a person down and push them toward the spiritual experiences they were seeking. But this is where the real mystery lingers. Why build a monument where you can barely breathe? These weren't homes. They weren't storage. They weren't shelters against the wind. They were, in a very real sense, a cathedral built in the clouds. And the specific rituals once performed among these stones are now largely lost to time. We can see the church, but we've forgotten the prayers. Practical note: this is genuinely dangerous, high-altitude terrain, and many sites like it are sensitive or restricted. But the lesson here is bigger than any single hike. Ancient people didn't only build in the easy, comfortable places. Sometimes the hardest, highest, most brutal spot on the entire map was the one that mattered the most. Number 6. Ring Mountains cupules. Let's come back down to earth, literally, to a windswept ridge rising above the town of Tiburon in the San Francisco Bay Area, called Ring Mountain. It's an astonishing place before you even find the mysteries, because it sits on rare blue-green rock that's over 150 million years old, stone so unusual that geologists travel just to see it. But scattered across these ancient boulders is something far more puzzling than the rocks themselves. Here you'll find petroglyphs believed to be around 2,400 years old, made by the ancestors of the Coast Miwok people who lived along these shores. And it's one very particular kind of carving that turns this hillside into a genuine head-scratcher: cupules. Cupules are small, deliberate, cup-shaped depressions, little rounded dimples pecked directly into the solid stone. Sometimes they appear alone, sometimes they cluster in dozens, sometimes they seem to form patterns. They look simple. They are anything but. Because here's the thing that stops archaeologists in their tracks. Cupules appear on rock all over the world, on nearly every inhabited continent, across wildly different cultures that never met. And despite that, their meaning remains one of archaeology's greatest unsolved puzzles. Were they made for fertility rituals? To bring rain? To mark a sacred boundary or a place of power? Some researchers even suspect that the act of pecking itself was the true purpose, that the stone dust created during the grinding was considered powerful or holy, and the little cup was simply what got left behind. The truth is, nobody knows for certain. That's what makes standing here so eerie. You're looking at a symbol repeated across the whole human family, and we still can't decode it. How to experience it? Ring Mountain is an open space preserve with public trails and jaw-dropping views across the entire bay. When you reach the marked petroglyph boulder, trace your eyes, never your hands, across those little cups and ask yourself the exact same question that stumps the experts. Why here, and why this shape? Number 5. Petroglyph Point, at lava beds journey now to far northern California, to the strange volcanic landscape of Lava Beds National Monument. Out of this rugged terrain rises a massive formation called Petroglyph Point, a towering wall of soft volcanic rock that, thousands of years ago, stood as an island in the middle of a wide lake, and its face is one of the most jaw-dropping art galleries in North America. Covering this cliff are more than 5,000 individual carvings, one of the single largest concentrations of rock art anywhere in California. Spirals, grids, diamonds, wavy lines, mysterious symbols stacked one on top of another, layer upon layer, carved over an immense span of time. But here's the detail that gives people chills the moment they understand it. Many of these carvings sit high up on the cliff face, in spots that are completely out of reach from the ground today. So how did anyone make them? The answer is unforgettable. The ancestors of the Modoc people carved them from canoes, floating on the surface of the lake that once lapped against the base of the rock. Over the centuries, that lake receded and dried away, leaving the ancient art stranded high in the air, hovering above the desert like a message pinned to the sky. And the mystery is the same one that haunts nearly every site on this list. 5,000 symbols, possibly thousands of years of work. And no key to read a single one. Some may be clan markers, some may be spiritual visions, some may record real events, hunts, floods, ceremonies, dreams. But the specific vocabulary is gone, taking its meaning with it. We're staring at a library where we can see every book but can't open one. Practical tip: Petroglyph Point is accessible by car inside the monument, with an interpretive fence set up to protect the fragile panel. For the best experience, go in low, angled light, early morning or late afternoon, when long shadows fill the grooves and the carvings suddenly leap right off the wall. Number 4. The Topac Maze. Down near the town of Needles, on a dusty bluff overlooking the Colorado River, lies something that looks like almost nothing from where you're standing, but reveals itself as breathtaking the moment you rise above it. This is the Topac Maze, also known as the Mystic Maze. It sprawls across an astonishing 10 to 18 acres of desert, mile after mile of parallel gravel ridges and shallow furrows, raked into the ground like the endless teeth of a giant comb. To the Fort Mojave people, This is not a curiosity. It is a profoundly sacred site, believed to be over 600 years old, and quite possibly far older than that. And the traditional story behind it is haunting. One interpretation holds that warriors returning from battle would come here and walk the maze, winding through its endless lines to cleanse themselves and confuse the spirits of the dead, so that those restless spirits, lost in the twisting pattern, could never follow the living back home. Imagine walking that maze in the desert heat, shaking off the ghosts of war with every step. But here's where the mystery deepens into something genuinely frustrating. The full purpose, the exact age, and even the true size of the original maze are all hotly debated. Because this land sits along a modern corridor, much of the site was disturbed and damaged over the years by railroads, roads, and development. So the version we can see today may be nothing more than a surviving fragment, a torn corner of something once far larger, far more intricate, and far more ancient than we can now reconstruct. How to appreciate it? This is critical. The Topac Maze is a living, sacred site, not a tourist playground or a photo op. You do not walk on it. Instead, learn its story, honor its boundaries, and understand something important. Some structures hold their power precisely because their true meaning still belongs to a living community, not to us, and not to the internet. Number 3. The Koso Range petroglyphs. Now for a place hidden in one of the most unlikely vaults imaginable. Deep inside an active naval weapons station near China Lake, sealed off from the public for decades, lies the Coso Range, home to what may be the single greatest concentration of rock art in the entire Western Hemisphere. We're not talking about a few carvings. We're talking tens of thousands of them, with some estimated to be as much as 12,000 years old. Let that number sink in. 12,000 years. These images were being carved into stone while much of the world was still emerging from the last ice age, and the Koso art is instantly recognizable, unlike anything around it. There are thousands upon thousands of bighorn sheep, carved again and again across the black volcanic rock. And walking among them are strange, elaborate human-like figures, dressed in what look like patterned robes, masks, or ceremonial costumes. Researchers have a name for these eerie beings: patterned body anthropomorphs. They stare out from the stone like visitors from a forgotten dream. Now, archaeologists do have strong theories here. Much of the art appears deeply tied to hunting magic and shamanic ritual, and the endless bighorn sheep may be linked to rainmaking and weather control, the sheep possibly serving as a powerful spirit symbol. But even with those theories, the sheer, overwhelming scale is what stops everyone cold. Why did people return to this one range, generation after generation, for thousands of years, to carve the same visions over and over and over again? What drew them back to this exact place, across such an unimaginable stretch of time? The intensity of it is still not fully understood. Practical tip: because it sits on an active military base, the only way in is through rare, pre-arranged guided tours, booked well in advance. If you love ancient history, it's a true bucket list pilgrimage. And here's the beautiful irony: restricted access accidentally preserved a world treasure that might otherwise have been lost. Number 2. The East Bay Mystery Walls. Here's one that hides in the most surprising place of all, right beside millions of people who walk past it every single day. Across the rolling hills of the San Francisco East Bay, and stretching all the way north to Chico and Red Bluff, you'll find low stone walls, built entirely without mortar. Some are made of ordinary basketball-sized rocks, but others contain massive sandstone boulders weighing a ton or more. For over a century, these have been called the Berkeley Mystery Walls, and the questions practically write themselves. They're too low to be fences. They're too low to be defensive barriers. They don't fully enclose anything at all. Some stretch on for over half a mile. Then, without warning, they just stop. Who moved boulders that heavy? How? And why would anyone build something so massive that leads absolutely nowhere? Now, here's where I have to be completely straight with you, because a good mystery deserves the truth. For years, people assumed these walls were ancient, maybe built by the Ohlone, or by some even older, forgotten culture. It's a thrilling idea. But then came the science. Recent lichen testing, measuring how long certain lichens had been growing on the stones, suggests that many of these walls were actually built between roughly 1850 and 1880, during California's early ranching era. The likely builders? Chinese, Mexican, or Native American laborers hired to clear land and corral livestock. So, case closed? Not quite. And this is what keeps it on the list at number 2. The walls span an enormous area and a long stretch of time, and the researchers still mapping them today admit they don't have one single, tidy answer that explains every stretch. The mystery shrank dramatically, but it never fully vanished. Some questions still hang in the air. How to experience it? You can walk right up to preserved sections at Ed R. Levin County Park and Mission Peak Regional Preserve. Go see them, run your eyes along the stones, and decide for yourself. Because sometimes a mystery's greatest gift is teaching you how to tell a legend from the evidence. Number 1. The Blythe Intaglios. And here we are, number 1. Out in the vast, silent Colorado desert near Blythe, right along the Arizona border, the earth itself has been transformed into art on a scale that almost defies belief. These are the Blythe Intaglios, enormous figures of humans, animals, and geometric shapes, etched directly into the desert floor. And the largest human figure stretches an absolutely staggering 171 feet long. That's longer than a passenger jet, lying flat on the ground. How were they made? The ancient artists scraped away the dark surface stones, a coating built up over thousands of years, to reveal the lighter soil hidden beneath. It's a technique that only works, and only survives, in a place this still, this dry, and this undisturbed, where the wind and the centuries leave the ground almost untouched. And now for the jaw-dropper, the detail that lands this site at the very top. These figures are so impossibly large that, from the ground, they're almost invisible. For centuries, people walked right across them without ever realizing what lay beneath their feet. The Intaglios weren't widely recognized until 1932, when a pilot spotted them from the air, flying over the empty desert and suddenly seeing giants staring back up at him. Estimates place their age somewhere between 450 and 2,000 years old. They're most likely tied to the creation stories of the Mojave and Quechan peoples, possibly depicting a powerful figure from those ancient traditions. But the deepest question remains genuinely astonishing. How did artists lay out such enormous, accurate, perfectly proportioned figures without ever once being able to see them from above? How do you draw a 170-foot person when you can never step back far enough to check your work? That mystery still hangs over the desert. How to experience it? The Intaglios are protected by fencing off a dirt road north of Blythe, with a designated viewing area. Go at dawn or dusk, when the low sun throws the figures into sharp relief. Then stand at the edge, look out at a 170-foot human carved into the living earth, and feel just how small and how recent your own moment on this land truly is. So there you have it, 12 ancient structures scattered across the California wilderness, each one stranger than the last, giant figures carved into the desert. Cliffs covered in thousands of symbols no living person can read, walls that lead nowhere, rocks that sail across dry lake beds, sacred mazes, cloud-high cathedrals of stone, and a medicine man frozen forever into the skyline. And notice what we found along the way. Some of these mysteries have been solved, like the sailing stones and their secret dance of ice. Some have been partly explained, like those East Bay walls that turned out younger than the legends claimed, and some remain wide open. The Intaglios, the endless carvings of Coso, the little cup stones of Ring Mountain, genuine questions still waiting for the right curious mind to finally crack them. That's the real magic of these places. They remind us that history isn't only in books and museums. It's out there right now, dusty, silent, and waiting, carved into rock and raked into sand by people who looked up at the same sky we do and left behind messages we're still struggling to understand. Maybe one of them will be understood by you.